Hello all and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls. Today we're tackling the 50cc itemless lightning cup. And as per usual, we're going to be tackling these one at a time, aiming to beat every race without the intentional use of items. Which means yes, I can run into random mushrooms on the ground and avoid, hopefully, getting struck by lightning by a thundercloud. Anywho, today, I want to talk about the Lightning Cup and its rather weird assortment of courses. See, where most end up falling into what I would consider to be categories of reasonably straight to ridiculously curvy, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, everything with the Lightning Cup ironically fits pretty well together. And to iterate my point, I want you to look at the map of Mario Circuit here. It is a reasonably wide course, loop-de-loops of the galore. This is what I would very favorably consider to be a practice course. It's one that is supposed to be getting the players used to the idea of using snaking and more specifically, more advanced drifting techniques to allow the player to learn how to function at higher end play. Now, I like this because in certain ways you end up with a circumstance where you can't go as wide as you might want. There are oil slicks in the way, there are warp pipes, bananas, item boxes. So it's teaching you about your racing line in and of itself. And normally I don't give all that much credit to the SNES tracks. I find them pretty weak altogether. But this one specifically is one that has intrigued me and one that I generally appreciate more playing it at a later date than I did way back as a kid. Going into our second track, you have Peach Gardens. And Peach Garden is another one that I think does this beautifully. See, Peach Garden focuses in on short straightaways with reasonably wide turns. It's teaching you about outside drift and, by extension, how to handle your cup as a whole and how to handle tighter turns, etc. Now, this grid pattern at the back is actually one of my favorite points because I normally just drive straight, take one turn, and that's that. And as I was playing this time, I realized, wait a minute, I can do a blue mini turbo at every one of those grids. So that was one of the first real kickers into I can use more advanced drift techniques and use this to practice how I'm doing it. Now, reality is that a lot of these more advanced drift techniques don't necessarily work as well for bikes. Now, bikes were introduced in Mario Kart Wii as an alternative, something that I think went rather well and rather poorly. Reality is that if you are wanting to be the best you can be, generally people will say pick a bike because bikes have the wonderful, joyous secondary effect of being able to do a wheelie, which increases your acceleration and top speed as long as you can maintain a straight line. Meaning that this back and forth blue tier boost, while works beautifully for karts, does not work well for bikes compared to having the blunt straight line approach. The ability to do a wheelie and have a straight line of I'm going this way works great within the context of being able to use bikes, but not so well when you're dealing with standard run-of-the-mill play the game type of tracks. The final thing I need to mention about this is I'm not much for using bikes at all, especially not inside drift bikes. Inside drift bikes are the pinnacle of top speed in Mario Kart, which is great. You get to take your turns as tight as or tighter than ever before. You get to use your boosts, your drift boosts, to come out of turns even faster. You get to use every single tool that this game has given you to really showcase just how ridiculously good you are at Mario Kart. And yet, in my mind, it is something that I just cannot grasp very well, simply due to the fact that for the longest time, while I did appreciate the use of inside drift bikes as a kid, I loved the Mach bike, I loved the Flame Runner. For example, I refused to use manual transmission because I didn't understand the difference between it as a kid. I thought I was actively shifting up, shifting down throughout the play. And that was something that I didn't want to have the energy investment in to make happen. Couple that with the motion controls that I tended to use as a kid because it felt more like driving a car, and you had a recipe for disaster with me going into each cup. So the reason I want to bring all this up is because for the next, I'm going to say 8 weeks, we're going to be redoing everything at 100cc, completely random character and kart combinations, no big deal there. But it means that you're going to see me flub up a lot over the next 8 weeks as I attempt to redo this challenge with a higher tier vehicle with the motorcycles. And I'll be honest, I look forward to it. Reality is that I know that I am not a perfect player. Never have, never will. But at the very least, I can acknowledge my strengths and weaknesses where they lie. And one of my key strengths is understanding my outside drift to a fairly ridiculous degree. I don't necessarily believe that I'm perfect. I believe there are other players that do better than I ever will. But I do believe that I am one of the people ridiculous enough to attempt to beat Mario Kart Wii without using items. And for that, I gotta give myself some pat on the back. The Lightning Cup houses one of the few tracks that an inside drifting bike is actually weaker than a kart. And to explain it, we need to go to the top of the mountain here. So, the thing about inside drifting bikes is that they tend to focus on very tight turns, very consistent. When you have a long straightaway like we do here, bikes tend to want to use wheelies. But wheelies on any surface that is rough or bounces your cart around is not going to end up with the appropriate reaction. You're going to have to constantly reset it, and to have that lucky situation crop up time in, time again is ludicrous. And so, the easiest way to fix that is very simple. Focus on using a vehicle that doesn't rely on the boost. Focus on a vehicle that is more stable in these bumpy terrains. And for that, you have to go towards the karts. So, I gotta say, I love that aspect about this. And DK Mountain being by far and away my favorite course not my favorite, my second favorite course in Mario Kart Double Dash. Seeing its return in Mario Kart Wii had me absolutely overjoyed. Anyways, we're running near the end of track number 3. Mario is enjoying his day, Luigi is hot on his heels, and I gotta say that, in all honesty, this challenge at the moment has been both easier and harder than I had anticipated. There are some tracks that have come back to bite me, like the Dry Ruins on the Special Cup, that hit me 5 times with blue shells in a single race, which is an absurd number for a single race. But aside from getting carted by items, The courses themselves I apparently have good enough memory of that I'm not totally out to lunch for the entirety of the race. Anyways, we have hit 45 points, which means it's time to tackle the final race, Mario Kart 64's Bowser Castle. Now, in my Double Dash round of play, shall we say, I had mentioned that Mario Kart tends to focus on a rubber band style AI. The farther ahead you get, the more aggressive and faster the enemy vehicles become. This is one of the key tenets of what makes Mario Kart work the way it does. Mario Kart 64's AI also had circumstances where it was near impossible for the AI to function properly and actually get certain outcomes to happen the way they are intended to. The reason I want to bring this up is because Mario Kart 64's Bowser Castle is one of the few tracks that is unfair to the player in single-player modes. To iterate my point, I want to look at what happens in Mario Kart 64. Rivals get items in places where they shouldn't get items. Enemies end up with high-end items or faster movement speed when you end up farther ahead, up to, I believe it's 1.5 to double their original speed, simply to make sure that they have a chance at catching up. But also, there are aspects in certain tracks that are intended to make your play more difficult, such as the thwomps. Now, in these hallways here, you have the thwomps that just act the way they do. There's nothing really getting in your way. But these two here that are now going up in front of me, regardless of what placement you are, will always chase after the player in an attempt to slow you down. It doesn't matter if there are other vehicles in front of you, it doesn't matter how it goes. What matters is that they are actively in front of you 24/7. Which means, theoretically, knowing that, you can use it to try to squish an opponent in front of you, which I think is absolutely hilarious. But also, it means that the gameplay is stacked against or with the player in this particular track, in part because of how well you are expected to be playing at this point in time. Now, the reason I want to bring up this circumstance in and of itself is because I don't think I ever really gave the credit that it really deserved to make that happen. A lot of games generally end up with this circumstance of your character and your playstyle is directly affected by the game. I don't deny that. But I never really considered how rubber banding and AI in general could be more heavily focused on the player in general over the course of an entire game. And this is just one such circumstance where it happens. Another one, if you were to go back and look at some of my older content, was the race against Jules in Need for Speed Most Wanted. There are AI entities that come out of the sides of the arena specifically to slow you down every time you play it. It is a track stacked against the player. Your goal in this circumstance is to find a way to best Jules without totaling your vehicle. Now, 9 times out of 10, I usually end up using her AI against her, but the situation still stands that there was more at play than what is immediately apparent to the player, which I think is fantastic, and I wish that more games did something of that nature, especially in racing games, because too often racing games end up being too easy because we as players develop a level of muscle memory and understanding of the courses that is far surpassing our standard runs of the game. Anywho, with that, we have officially completed all of the 50cc Lightning Cup without the use of items. If you like what you see, or are curious how badly using bikes is gonna mess me up, drop a like, leave a subscribe, and even a comment down below. I'd love to see it. Until next time, I hope you all get a little lucky, and I hope you all have a good one. Until next time.